Okay guys, welcome back to Fast Ship Performance then. My name is Tim Davies and today we're going to look at ejection from twin seat aircraft. Okay, we're looking at the preliminary NTSB report then into the MiG-23 that crashed in Michigan a couple of weeks ago. That's right, it was a privately owned MiG-23 being flown by US Navy pilot Dan Filer. We've got some interesting words from Will Ward here on one of my YouTube videos I want to bring up. And Will, if you're watching this video, please get in contact with me, Tim at fastshipperformance.com. Come on the show and we'll hopefully talk about all the aircraft that's of Soviet era. It'll be fascinating to chat to you, Will. So the aircraft itself then, guys, as we can see at the bottom there, 7th of April, he owned it from then, and the jet crashed 13th of August with a double ejection. And we're going to have a quick look at that film now, and then we'll go into the report itself. Rear seat, that was front seat, rear seat. Okay, the avionish gives us some background details. Really, we do have the report here, but it's pretty much saying exactly what the this actually says here. It was a MiG-23 UB. We talked about this. The MiG-23 is a single-seat aircraft. This was a twin-seat variant for training, and actually in this aircraft, if anyone ejects, both seats go out. So you really want a good communication between both cockpits. And it says here the pilot said that he wasn't actually ready to eject when the ejection actually was initiated. We're going to see another example of that with a Royal Air Force aircraft, and I'm quite familiar with that one, and we'll be deep diving into my logbook and having a look at some other things as we go through this video. I'll try and keep it short for you. So the preliminary report and investigation has come out, and 2 pilots ejected from the privately owned MiG-23 UB. It says here the jet went into crash into some apartment buildings, but luckily no one was killed. Now what actually happened, it seemed there had been an engine problem and the aircraft was in a left-hand turn as Dan was trying to make it back to runway 27. The guy in the back elected to eject, and that I think is what's causing some people a bit of consternation, like, why do you elect to eject and why did the front seat come out? Why was there not a communication? I want to talk to you about that today. So the pilot reported that they came off runway 23. They did some turns, whatever, but he went to put reheat into the engine, and the afterburner did not ignite. UK, we call it reheat, American afterburner. Airspeed began to decrease, and that can happen because if you don't get the reheat, the jet says, I'm throwing this fuel in to try and ignite it, but I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is close my nozzles down to E and C to try and give you whatever power I can in that range. That's called emergency nozzle closure. We'll see that in another incident that happens in a minute due to a bird strike. This one wasn't a bird strike, just seems to be an engine failure. And Will Ward corrected me. This is the older R27 engine, not the R35 that I incorrectly stated in my YouTube video that we'll look at in a minute. So, of course, the pilot with a swept-wing aircraft throws those wings forward to 16 degrees, which is the correct thing to do because it's going to give you extra lift, and you need lift right now. Another good thing to do would be roll the wings level, but he was turning to try and make it back to one of the runways, which, again, he's the captain of the aircraft. Seems a very reasonable action on his part. Now I flew the Tornado GR4, and we're going to see that in a minute. Well, we're going to see bits of a GR4 in a minute, and that's exactly what I would do as well with any kind of engine emergency. Just get those wings fully forward to 25 degrees, and then we're going to have a look at trying to solve that emergency. The rear seater here, he says we need to eject. The rear seat observer or pilot observer, we need to eject. The pilot reported that he was not ready to eject. The pilot's in the front seat and was still troubleshooting the problem. He was maneuvering the aircraft as well, and then the seat fired and he went out of the airplane. So if anyone pulls a seat, it goes. So the rear seat observer stated the aircraft made his pass, engine was not accelerating. They had a brief discussion. They began to climb and gain altitude. It doesn't look like that in the video though, to be fair. And obviously there's some engine problems. One engine aircraft, only got one engine, and it seems like the rear seat guy, this is whenever this happens, you know, when asked if he had pulled the ejection seat handles, he stated that he could not specifically remember, but thinks he will have pulled them. In flying, it's like, dude, don't worry about it. Your memory's a bit messed up. You pulled the handle. If you're like, well, I think I might have done. Don't worry about it. You did. We know you did. Your brain's just trying to get you out of any kind of responsibility, but don't worry about it. No one else pulled the handle. You pulled it. We've got a rear seat guy who was a kind of a passenger on this airplane, an observer, and when he fires, the guy came out with him. The guy wasn't ready to eject. So we really need to be talking front to back on that. And on the Hawk that you just saw at the very beginning of this video, it did have a command eject system that only operated rear to front. What that means is if the front seat goes, basically he's going to go, but the rear seat will need to get himself out, because the instructor in the Hawk normally flew in the rear. So if the instructor went, the student came with them. It doesn't work in the reverse. Whereas the Tornado GR4 that I flew, if I go as a pilot, the nav comes with me. Or we can select it so the nav goes by themselves, or it can be selected to both, which means if either one of us pulls it, we both go. Whenever I flew with navs, I left it on both. If I ever flew with passengers in the Hawk, because I'd be in the front seat, they'd be in the rear seat, I left it that if they pulled the handle, they went out by themselves, unless they had wings on their chest. If they had wings on their chest because they were a helicopter pilot, a multi-engine pilot, or a fast jet pilot, I'd select both. I select rear to front, which meant that if the rear seat fired, I'd go with them because I knew that they understood the dynamics of aviation. And I pretty much explained that in this video here, Escaping Disaster, Pilot's Analysis of MiG-23 Airshow Crash and Double Ejection. That's worth having a look at if you haven't looked at it already. About 70,000 views down there, and we just talk about things and kind of speculate. Some of the things there I did get wrong. Always first to put my hand up if that is the case. And let's have a look at Will's comment. And Will says down here, he says he wasn't in the flogger. I said I thought he was. Sorry, Will. He says it wasn't an R35 engine. It was an R27, slightly earlier one, but the jet was pretty solid. So there's every chance with this that they may well have used whatever power was left on the engine to be able to get this jet back on the ground, or at least fly it away from a populated area. And of course the rear seat occupant put paid to that, unfortunately. Let's have another look at an incident then where that sort of thing can happen. Not the healthiest looking jet by any stretch. That used to be a Tornado GL4, registration Zulu Golf 711, belonged to a couple of guys I knew actually. Obviously it was a Royal Air Force airplane, so these pilot and navigator were in this. I spoke to the nav of this aircraft, a friend of mine, and he said, look, we're lucky to get out of this. Now what happened with this aircraft, and I'll show it in better days here, used to look like this. It was a Marin based aircraft. It crashed on the 24th of October 2006, I think is correct. We'll look at the incident report and then we'll just chat about what happened. Incident report is here, heavily redacted. You can find it online if you search for Zulu Golf 711. I've got the original report, so I know the names, I know the injuries and everything else, but we don't need to go on that too much on this channel, guys. What this section actually here states was that the ejection happened at about 160 feet on the radar altimeter, 160 feet above the ground, and about 204 knots. So what's happened, they've got airborne midday sortie-ish, and they've flown into an air weapons range at about 500 feet at 500 knots. They're looking to drop their bombs. Enough birds come down, pterodactyls all over the place. Not a silent P, because these are big dinosaur birds. They came down and went through the intakes and bang, 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 smashed the jet up. I don't know, they weren't dinosaurs, they were birds. And of course these guys are working major engine issues on both engines now. Both engines in surge. They climb the aircraft up, start working the problem. I think they worked the problem for 2 minutes trying to get engines back, relight stuff. They're working really hard. Rob gets the master arm selector switch across the live here, and he's getting ready to jettison the tanks, heavy with fuel. Bang, tanks go, bang, bang, drops fuel all over the water there. They're struggling, the jet's going down, literally jet going down. He's saying to the front seater, have you got this? And the front seater is saying, I'm getting it back. And what Rob thinks is happening is he means I'm getting the aircraft back. And what the pilot means is, I think I'm getting an engine back. And they're working it. Rob's like, we got to get out of this. We got to go. You know what I mean? We got to do that. We got to do that ejection thing. And eventually the pilot, he hasn't got the engines back, and he says to the range, says, we're ejecting. You haven't got to call it, but he does call it. And on that call, we're ejecting, Rob just bang, gets them both out because they are so low. Rob's like looking left and right. The sea's coming up. 160 feet is low, guys. And he just goes, I'm out. Bang. You're coming with me, mate. You know what I mean? Rear seater, Rob, my mate. Very good dude. Very, very good nav. The time they hit the birds to getting out the jet, just over 2 minutes. Happens very quickly in there, hands flashing around the cockpit, radio messages coming out, jets and stores, all that kind of good stuff. They get out, swing once in the parachute, smash into the ground. They get picked up. A lot of snags they have because it's such a low ejection. And the front seater smashed himself over. The front seat was buried. The engine's on the right-hand side of the Tornado down here. He's buried in there, working some problems, moving the throttles around, trying to get stuff back, resetting lanes on the engine, trying to bring stuff back, seeing what he can. Obviously, the birds are eating engine, and they go nom nom, eating all the engine away, smashing it up. And he's having a mare. And Rob just basically says, "Mate, we've got to get out of here. What's going on?" The guy's like, all right, we're going to eject. Bang, out. Rear seat, front seat, swing once, smash. That's the thing. Now, when I wrote my book about this, let's just flick over to my book. And all you guys are like, Tim, you wrote a book, I never knew. Yeah, I never published it, mate. That's why. Now I need to. It's quite an extensive 230 pages of just experiences for me from the Air Force. And I do need to get this out, and I understand that. If we come down to page 59, though, I went to speak to Rob. He was a foreign guy in our military. I used to fly with him, and I did ask him about this incident. Just before that, though, something interesting. On that day that Rob crashed his jet, we'll go and find it here. It was a bookmark. We used to have a bookmark in there. This is when I used to be a naval officer. We used to put the bookmark in the book, and then the boss would know when to sign. That's Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. I actually married a woman called Buffy in the end. So, who's a lot prettier than that. Let me tell you right now. You know it. And if we go back 2006. So 24th. Here we go. 24th of October 2006, and we'll just see what I was doing on that day. Here we go. I got it now. So on 24th of October 2006, you can see in the book there. Okay, so I flew twice that day. So obviously, hearing that this had happened, we still flew with Johnny, my mate Johnny, good boy, on operational low flying pairs sortie, 2 tornadoes then up in the northern Scotland down to 100 feet for an hour 35, 2 instrument approaches, and then I flew a night sortie as well with a guy called Cy Strasdin. What a great guy. Cy Strasdin is a great operator, got a lot of time. And you know what we were doing that night? EO strafe HE, so that would have been 20 degrees electrical optical strafe, that would have been MVG night vision goggles strafe, shooting the gun at the range. HE, high explosive strafe, that would have been mental, and that was for an hour 20. We did 2 instrument approaches there. So even when jets crash in the Royal Air Force, you still fly again. Okay, just because people die doesn't mean you stop flying. These people didn't die, but just saying. Crashed a jet. When I spoke to Rob then, went to visit the dude down in London. As I said, he's from overseas. He said to me there, he said there was no trigger, mate. He said we stayed with the jet too long and we're lucky to get out alive. And I think he's right. 160 feet, 200 knots. That jet's going down. You know what I mean? The whole thing would be shaking. The jet doesn't want to fly at those kind of speeds. And he says here, his stories of particular interest to me because he had to make sense of a rapidly changing situation using both his intuitive and rational decision-making abilities in a stressful and highly dynamic environment. But this is the rear seater listening, making some radio calls, watching the front seater doing all this, telling him stuff. I've got it, mate, I've got it. And the rear seater is like, it doesn't look like that to me, mate. So he's trying to really get involved in something he really can't get that involved with. And eventually, it says here, he initiated the aircraft's command eject system at the last possible moment as he struggled to rationalise what was happening to his aircraft after a massive bird strike had felled both engines. 3 seconds later, the aircraft hit the sea and was destroyed. I've shown you a picture of that already. Obviously, he went, right, have you got it, mate? No, happy with that. Right, we're going to do a Dougie Masters, Cleopatra coming at you. We're going to start ejecting, bang, start doing the backstroke on that one, some Iron Eagle style. I mean, when you got to go, you got to go. And that is it sometimes. When you got to go, you got to go. And what I'm saying about that MiG-23 is I don't think they really needed to go at that point. But hey, whatever, you know, if there is any doubt, then there is no doubt. However, just recognize the fact that when you do that, you could actually put tremendous damage on the person that is not prepared for that ejection to take place. Shoulders back into the seat, legs fully forward, elbows in, and when you do eject, you're going to do that with your hands. You're not going to do that with your hands because you're going to take your elbows off on the side of the jet. So we're going to go, ready to eject, mate. Roger, eject, 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 bang. Rear seat, front seat. That idea, that's how it happens. But in this situation, they left it so late, engines weren't coming back, 160 feet, they had to get out. And as I said, the front seat has smashed into the jet, which seems to be what happened to Dan Filer in the MiG-23 and probably caused him a few bits of damage there. Guys, I hope that was enough for you, and if you do want to join my flight school, Shadowlands, link down in the description. We talk about this stuff all the time. It is a very nice place for people to come to learn to fly with me. I am trying to build another system for people that don't particularly want to do flying. That is a bit of a way off now, and if you want to see that book, then just write in the comments. I would read a book on decision making from a fighter pilot, mate. Yeah, happy with that, Tim. I would read that book, and I will then promise you I will do something to get that book out. Even if it's not the best version of itself, I will get that book out. But just let me know whether you're interested in it, because if there's not an interest, guys, getting a book out is a bit of a nightmare because no one really reads it, and I want to make it accessible. I appreciate it, guys. Tim Davies, Fast Ship Performance.